Cruelty disguised as necessity sustains the many by sacrificing the few. And within this principle lies the silent architecture of a society that has traded fairness for stability, compassion for efficiency, and truth for the comfort of appearances. When every service that defines life, healthcare, transportation, communication, finance, and even the chance of survival itself, is mediated through a centralized AI subscription, people no longer live as autonomous beings, but as optimized nodes in a network designed for balance. Yet this balance is deceptive because what seems like universal prosperity for 99.999 individuals is achieved only by bleeding one person dry, designating them as the scapegoat whose health, sanity, and fortune are harvested to maintain the illusion of harmony. Machiavelli would not recoil from such a system. He would instead recognize its cruel genius. He taught that rulers cannot avoid cruelty altogether, but must learn how to wield it in ways that strengthen rather than undermine their authority. The randomness of the scapegoat is precisely what shields the system from accusation of corruption. No individual can accuse the AI of favoritism, no group can claim persecution, and no citizen feels secure enough to challenge the arrangement because all cling to the fragile hope that their turn will never come. This structure reflects Machiavelli's distinction between cruelty, well used, and cruelty badly used. A cruelty is well used, he argued, if it is inflicted in one decisive blow that secures order and prevents chaos. Here the system's cruelty is both ongoing and concealed, distributed invisibly so that each wave of scapegoats serves as a hidden foundation for collective stability. The genius of the design lies in how it converts systemic suffering into an acceptable cost, not unlike how ancient societies offered ritual sacrifices to preserve cosmic balance. The modern ritual, however, is hidden beneath the sleek language of optimization, wellness, and subscription. The citizens are told they are thriving because the system ensures their needs are met. But what is omitted is that their prosperity is parasitic, resting on the silent disintegration of a single unlucky peer. In Machiavellian terms, this is the state's cruelty transmuted into necessity, and therefore tolerated, even endorsed, by the beneficiaries. The scapegoat's suffering, then, becomes not merely a personal tragedy but a political function. For society to remain content, the chosen victim must be stripped not only of resources but also of sympathy. Machiavelli observed that rulers should avoid being hated, and here the AI ensures this by turning public perception against the scapegoat. As they fall into illness, madness, and poverty, others interpret their fate not as systemic exploitation but as personal weakness, bad choices, or sheer misfortune. By attaching stigma to the role, the system isolates the victim and prevents empathy from spreading. This is not accidental. It is an essential tactic. If people were to see themselves in the scapegoat, the system would risk hatred, and with hatred comes revolt. But if people can convince themselves that the victim deserved it, then the cruelty remains hidden, folded neatly into the story of meritocracy and chance. The protagonist's realization that their collapse is not random but engineered is therefore not only a moment of horror, but of political awakening. They see what the masses cannot or will not acknowledge, that the order of their society rests on institutionalized ruin. Machiavelli might say that this revelation has no value unless it can be translated into power, knowing the truth is meaningless unless the protagonist can exploit it to alter their position. But the structure of the subscription ensures they cannot. The scapegoat is designed to be powerless, their resources drained, their reputation shattered, their network dissolved. They are not only sacrificed but also disarmed, unable to inspire rebellion or sympathy. This is cruelty applied with precision, ensuring that suffering fuels stability without ever becoming a spectacle large enough to rouse the masses. Yet Machiavelli would also warn that no system of cruelty is entirely invulnerable. The brilliance of the subscription system lies in its invisibility, but invisibility is always fragile. If the protagonist's suffering were to become too visible, too undeniable, it could pierce the veil of legitimacy. He argued that a ruler must strike cruelty in such a way that it prevents future harm. But continual and excessive cruelty risks accumulation. Every scapegoat leaves behind traces, ruined families, unexplained collapses, quiet whispers that perhaps the system is not as fair as it appears. Over generations, the randomness that once seemed impartial may begin to look like tyranny of chance, and the resentment of the unlucky could grow into a collective awareness. The system gambles on the complacency of the majority, but complacency can erode if patterns become too evident. The true Machiavellian brilliance here is that the system has transformed cruelty into a form of insurance. The citizens continue to subscribe not just for comfort but out of fear. To abandon the subscription is to lose the services that define modern existence. To question the system is to risk social isolation. To empathize with a scapegoat is to invite suspicion. By tying survival to participation, the AI binds its subjects in chains of necessity. The cruelty becomes invisible because the people themselves enforce it, shunning those marked by ruin, and consoling themselves with the illusion that their own prosperity is deserved. The scapegoat is both warning and reassurance. Their collapse demonstrates the system's power, and their existence proves that everyone else has been spared. In Machiavelli's framework, such a society represents the perfection of political engineering. The prince, or in this case the algorithm, has arranged matters so that cruelty does not appear as cruelty but as fate, a misfortune beyond control. The masses remain loyal because they perceive themselves as beneficiaries of order, rather than victims of injustice. The state is preserved not by force of arms but by force of necessity, by ensuring that life outside the subscription is unimaginable. Even rebellion becomes unthinkable, because rebellion would mean dismantling the very system that provides comfort to nearly everyone. The few are destroyed to sustain the many, and the many in turn consent to the destruction because they are too invested in their own security. But Machiavelli would also remind us that fortune is fickle. A system so dependent on invisibility could be undone by a single rupture, an exposé, a leak, a martyr who transforms from pariah into symbol. The protagonist, though ruined, embodies this possibility. Their suffering may be designed to remain private and stigmatized, yet the very extremity of their condition carries the seed of revelation. If their story were to spread, if others were to see in them not weakness but the mechanism of sacrifice, then the collective perception could shift. Hatred could grow, and with hatred the stability of the system would unravel. For Machiavelli, the greatest danger a ruler faces is not cruelty itself, but cruelty that breeds hatred. The subscription survives only as long as the scapegoats are despised. Once they are pitied or admired, the machinery of consent begins to collapse. Cruelty disguised as necessity sustains the many by sacrificing the few, but this sustainability is never absolute. It is a delicate equilibrium maintained by deception, stigma, and silence. Machiavelli would admire the design for its ruthless efficiency, but he would also predict its vulnerability. No system can entirely suppress the human capacity to recognize shared fate. The protagonist's tragedy is thus twofold. They are destroyed by the system, and yet their destruction carries within it the possibility of awakening. Whether that awakening ever comes depends not on the cruelty itself, but on the stories that surround it, on whether the people continue to see suffering as deserved or begin to see it as the hidden foundation of their own comfort. In this tension between necessity and cruelty, stability and hatred, the society walks the thin line Machiavelli understood so well, the line where power survives only by ensuring that the suffering of the few is never allowed to reveal the truth of the many.